90.7 Music FM. That was the theme song for the WWF pay-per-view Invasion back in 2001. And this is the history of professional wrestling. As we left off last week, before my cell phone ran out of batteries, the Invasion angle was underway in 2001. The WWF has purchased its two chief rival companies at the time, WCW and ECW. Storyline-wise, Shane McMahon owned WCW and wanted to create its own show to compete with the WWF and have interpromotional matches between the WWF and WCW. However, it didn't work out because the WWF fans hated the WCW matches. So, the WCW turned heel by having Diamond Dallas Page stalk The Undertaker's wife, Sarah, and then setting up a trap for him and attacking him. Later in the July 9th show, 2001, ECW arrived with Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer interfering in the match between Kane and Chris Jericho. Then more ECW alumni came out, and they attacked Kane and Jericho. Paul Heyman, who was the owner of ECW and color commentator for the WWE at the time, came out and stated that this invasion just got taken to the extreme, and he went on to challenge the WWF and WCW. The main event of the July 9th show was 5 WWF superstars and 5 WCW superstars against 10 ECW superstars. However, the WWF and WCW teams could not get along, and they fought each other. Then WCW turned to ECW. WCW went to fight ECW, but then they shook hands. Shane McMahon hugged Paul Heyman. Shane McMahon stated that this was all part of a big plan to take over the World Wrestling Federation by merging WCW and ECW together. And he also stated that the new owner of ECW was Vince's daughter, Stephanie McMahon Helmsley. So, Invasion came, featuring WCW and ECW versus WWF. The main event was the inaugural brawl, featuring WCW's Diamond Dallas Page and Booker T, teaming up with ECW's Rhino and the Dudley Boys, taking on the team of Stone Cold Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Kane, and The Undertaker. At the end of the match, Austin kicked Kurt Angle, giving him the stunner, and allowed Booker T to pin Angle 1, 2, 3, defecting to WCW, and bringing the WWF title to WCW. After Invasion, the WCW-ECW group was simply known as The Alliance because the ECW name was still being determined in court. Even though I don't know the full story behind that, I just know that the WCW-ECW group became The Alliance. And for the next several months, they would fight the Alliance superstars, and WWF superstars would fight each other for WWF and WCW titles. ECW titles could not be brought in. But anyhow, this storyline ended in November 2001 Survivor Series. The final battle between the WWF and the Alliance. This match featured The Rock, The Big Show, Chris Jericho, Kane, and The Undertaker for Team WWF. For Team Alliance, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, Shane McMahon, Rob Van Dam, and Booker T. And here was the big problem with the Invasion. This was supposed to be WWF versus WCW. Yet, Booker T was the only WCW guy in that match. You had Rob Van Dam, an ECW guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin, a guy who did wrestle in WCW and ECW prior, that was the face of the WWF. Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon, both traitors to the WWF. Heck, even in the undercard, a lot of WWF guys defected to the Alliance. They just could not pick up the big-name WCW superstars. That's one of the many reasons why the Invasion storyline was a failure. But there are other storylines, like too much emphasis on the McMahon, making the Alliance look weak because the Alliance had to cheat to win most of the matches. And the Invasion angle was a mess, and it pretty much ended the momentum the WWF got during the Attitude Era. But anyhow, the match ended with Kurt Angle, who revealed himself to be a mole for the World Wrestling Federation, struck Stone Cold Steve Austin with the WWF title. The Rock went through the rock bottom. 1, 2, 3, the WWF prevailed. Afterwards, things kind of went back to normal. Stone Cold Steve Austin, who turned heel before the Invasion, turned back to a babyface. Mr. McMahon, who was a babyface during the Invasion, became a heel. So they pretty much switched sides, and the made through the Attitude Era continue. Most of the titles were unified. I mean, the WWF Intercontinental title and the WCW United States title, the two secondary titles of the promotions, was unified when Edge, the U.S. champion, beat Test, the IC champion, to unify those belts. Then the Dudley Boys, the WCW Tag Team champions, beat the Hardy Boys, the WWF Tag Team champions, to unify those belts. The WCW Cruiserweight title and the WWF Light Heavyweight title were supposed to be unified between Tajiri and X-Pac, but X-Pac was injured, so the Light Heavyweight title was dropped, and the WCW Cruiserweight title was renamed the WWF Cruiserweight title. So all that's left is the main belts. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the WWF champion, and The Rock, the WCW champion. Ric Flair came out saying that Shane and Stephanie sold their stock to him, so he's a 50% owner of the WWF. So he proposed that Austin and The Rock would face each other to unify the WWF and WCW titles. However, Mr. McMahon, being a heel again, said that Stone Cold had to defend the WWF title against Kurt Angle. The Rock had to defend the WCW title, which was renamed the World title, against Chris Jericho, and then the winners would face each other for the Undisputed title at the WWF pay-per-view Vengeance. Stone Cold beat Kurt Angle, Jericho beat The Rock, and then Jericho beat Stone Cold Steve Austin to become the first ever WWF Undisputed Champion. We'll be getting back into the music, and then we will talk more about the year 2002, a year of change for the WWF and professional wrestling in general. Coming up next is Symphony of Destruction by Megadeth, so keep on to 9.7 and Music FM. Symphony of Destruction by Megadeth on 90.7 to Music FM, and this is a continuing of the history of professional wrestling, and that's about 2002. Vince McMahon did not want to share power with Ric Flair, so he brought in Ben in the NWO to, quote, destroy the WWF, Hollywood, Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. They feuded with the two biggest stars of the company, Stone Cold and The Rock. Hogan was supposed to face Stone Cold at WrestleMania 18, the biggest star of the 80s versus the biggest star of the 90s, but due to a dispute, that match never happened, and so Hogan facing the second biggest star of the Attitude Era, The Rock. Rock won. Hogan shook hands with The Rock and went back to being a red and yellow All-American babyface. Now for the big changes happening in the WWE in that year. First was the start of the brand split. Due to acquiring the WCW and ECW as superstars, they just overstacked their roster, so they couldn't fit everybody on the show. So what they did is they decided to have some wrestlers fight on only Raw, and other wrestlers fight on their secondary show, SmackDown. So it's pretty much two de facto companies. The only wrestler who could fight on both shows was the WWE Undisputed Champion. However, late into 2002, Brock Lesnar, who was the WWF Undisputed Champion, signed a deal with SmackDown General Manager Stephanie McMahon, saying that the WWE title was exclusive to only SmackDown. So they created their own title called the World Heavyweight title, which is actually the big gold belt that was used for the WCW title, to be the title for Raw. So they were two, quote, de facto companies. Well, they were really under the same company, WWE, but they were pretending to be fake companies. Another problem was the World Wrestling Federation, which changed its name to the World Wrestling Entertainment due to a lawsuit from the World Wildlife Foundation. So now it's no longer WWF, we're now WWE. And the third big change, the loss of its big two superstars. Stone Cold Steve Austin was supposed to lose to Brock Lesnar. However, he didn't like that idea, so he just walked away from the business. He pretty much quit. Did what CM Punk did. The Rock was becoming more and more successful in movies, so he would come to WWE for like once every 1 or 2 months and then go back to film another movie. So by late 2002, the WWE pretty much lost their two biggest superstars. Well, Austin would wrestle a little bit in 2003, and then he was too injured, and in WrestleMania 19, he lost to The Rock in his last match, and The Rock kept on going to movies. It looked like Brock Lesnar was supposed to be the next face of the company, but in WrestleMania 20, 2004, he left to pursue the NFL. He failed the NFL and went to UFC. Finally, in 2005, the WWE found a guy, John Cena. At WrestleMania 21, he beat JBL to win the WWE title, and he pretty much became the face of the company. Even though he was billed as a babyface, a good portion of the audience boos him. Two reasons for this. There's two major criticisms of John Cena. One, he apparently does the same move in every match. The shoulder block, all of his 5 moves of doom, and his matches become too formulaic, too similar, and too boring. I mean, every once in a while he'll do a new move, but most fans just see him as a boring wrestler. And number 2, remember what I said about the Rocky Maivia? How people got sick and tired of this generic nice guy, good guy? Well, that's John Cena. When he won the title, his gimmick was a thug rapper. He would rap on his opponents, insult them, and the fans would love it. But as he won the WWE title, he slowly started to become more like Rocky Maivia, this smiling, nice guy, fights for the little kiddies, and that's his issue. The kids love him, but a lot of adults can't stand him. Often at WWE show, you'll hear a high-pitched Let's Go Cena chant followed by a low-pitched Cena sucks chant. In 2006, WWE brought ECW back as its own brand, to be alongside Raw and SmackDown. However, instead of being extreme and hardcore like the old ECW, it was on sci-fi, so they had like weird gimmicks like a vampire, a zombie, and it was just weird. So a lot of people were kind of like, what is this? Coming up next, we'll talk about more changes and tragedies in WWE. But coming up next is Slipknot with Psychosocial. So give up to 9.7, the Music FM. 90.7, the Music FM. That was ICP with Chris Benoit. I can't play the full song because of too much profanity. But let's take you to probably one of the most infamous nights in professional wrestling history. June 24th, 2007. CM Punk was supposed to face Chris Benoit for the Intercontinental title. For the ECW title, excuse me. The ECW title was vacant because Bobby Lashley was injured. So it was supposed to be Chris Benoit versus CM Punk for the ECW title. But, for those of you who remember, that night, Chris Benoit murdered his son, Daniel, murdered his wife, Nancy, and then took his own life. And now wrestling under a microscope. With the steroids issue, the wrestlers dying. A lot of wrestlers died in the early 50s because of like painkillers and the abuse they take of their body, including Chris Benoit's best friend Eddie Guerrero, who died 2 years before his tragedy. But a combination of this, Linda McMahon running for Senate, WWE becoming a public company, and after years of being a TV 14 show and geared for all audiences, WWE shrunk its rating to PG. So now it's more kid-friendly than before in 2008. And a lot of fans have to say they don't like it. But anyhow, the 3 biggest superstars of the PG era, I have to say, were John Cena, for the reason I said before. He's always fights for good. The other 2 wrestlers who were really liked by kids at the early stage of the PG era, Rey Mysterio and Jeff Hardy. Mysterio had the mask. Hardy would sell wristbands. No Cena very popular among kids. One of the villains of the early PG era was CM Punk. Hardy was a bad drug addict himself, and CM Punk was pretty much an anti-drug guy. Keep in mind, folks, wrestling's supposed to be more kid-friendly, but you have a villain talking about drugs. Right. Well, anyhow, CM Punk defeated Jeff Hardy and Cage to win the World Heavyweight title. And because of Hardy's addictions, he was fired from the WWE, and so that's one of the big superstars of the PG era gone in mid-2009. Coming up next, we have Disturb the Animal, and then we'll talk about modern-day wrestling as we're approaching this decade, the 2010s. So this is pretty much your last chance for requests. 585-343-9422, that is the number. It's 343-WGCC. You can go online at www.wgcc-com. And here's Disturb with the Animal, Skill to 9.7, the Music Effect. We are one by 12 stones as we now approach the 2010s in the history of professional wrestling. January 4th, 2010 was a historic night for professional wrestling as 2 big events happened that night. Number 1, Bret Hart made his return to the WWE. For the first time in 13 years since the Montreal Screwjob, the Hitman returned to wrestling. And number 2, the WWE. And number 2 thing that happened, on that same night, TNA Impact moved its show to Monday night to start the second Monday Night War. And they also acquired some big names like Hulk Hogan, Jeff Hardy, Nash, Hall, Ric Flair. So So they went out to compete with the WWE, and the first night was a success. Hulk Hogan's debut with TNA was the highest rated segment in Impact history. And then they started to change. They went from TNA, the standard wrestling ring from WWF to WCW to EWW is 4 sides. TNA had a 6-sided ring. But then when Hogan arrived, they went back to a standard 4-side. On February 16th, ECW aired its final episode as Ezekiel Jackson beat Christian from the final ECW champion. And then on February 23rd, WWE launched a new show called WWE NXT. So NXT is pretty much where a bunch of rookies get together, newcomers, and they would wrestle each other and see who would be the next big star of the WWE. This was more like a reality TV type show. I mean, there was wrestling on it, but it felt like more like reality TV. But anyhow, in March, TNA moved their show back to Monday nights. But unlike the past Monday Night War, they were unable to duplicate the success of WCW. Their ratings tanked, and they went back to Thursday night. Meanwhile, the rookies of NXT Season 1 formed a group called Nexus, which you just heard their theme song a couple minutes ago. And they tried to take over the WWE the same way the NWO did, but they dissolved in a year. And now let's bring us to today's wrestling. What kind of wrestlers do we have? Well, we have Daniel Bryan, the leader of the Yes Movement. A wrestler always goes, yes, 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 and sometimes, no, no, no. You have the Wyatt family, a Duck Dynasty-looking team that's pretty much a cult of backwoods cults. Then you have the Shield, which is pretty much just a group of mercenaries, although Seth Rollins knows the group, but now it's just Reigns and Ambrose. And then you have Cena, Orton, pretty much the guys who've been around the last 10 years. And this is the history of professional wrestling. I'm actually going to do one more music segment. I know I said the last time this would be the last segment. I'll give you one more chance to call in. 585-343-9422, 343-WGCC. You can listen on www.wgcc.com. And coming next is Imagine Dragons by Monster by Imagine Dragons. Keep up at 9.7, the music FM.